Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to situate my questions within the amendment, which, as my colleague just pointed out, we have a sub-amendment to an amendment to an amendment. And what that comes down to is that we have an amendment that has removed the good faith defense from a section of the criminal code that deals with hate speech and that deals with hate speech. And my colleagues, through their amendment and sub-amendment, have tried to put in, or are trying to put back in, the idea that nothing in this section is to be interpreted or to be applied so as to interfere with, and this is where the sub-amendment comes in, freedom of conscience and religion, freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication, freedom of peaceful assembly, and freedom of association. So while I was waiting for my turn to speak, I did get an email, a message from one of my constituents who is very concerned about the fact, both that people could go to jail and could be criminally charged under these provisions in a different way than they're currently in a different way, just because when you change law, there has to be meaning to it. So presumably there's some form of change. But he was also concerned about the bail provisions that would relate to those kind of criminal charges. And so I'd like to ask, if we're not going to, he'd very much like us to consider C-14, but if we're not going to move on to consider C-14, he would like me to ask some questions of the justice lawyers about how bail would work if someone was criminally charged under the amended section of the section of the criminal code that is now amended by C-9. And so whichever one of the able counsel that is here representing the Department of Justice wants to answer my questions, I'm happy to have either one of you jump in. I'm wondering if you can explain how the current bail provisions work with respect to treat offenses with a hate motivation.
We are not talking about bail reforms now.
Well, I'll be honest, I can't hear what we're talking about because Mr. Baber's talking in my left ear. But so I'm not in a position really to overrule or oppose your point of order. So all I would ask is, I'll just say the same thing I've been saying all day, is if we can. You started out by talking about the sub-amendment and the amendment, so if we can just focus on that, that would be fine. Thank you.
Well, we know the Liberals don't want to talk about bail, but members of my community very much want me to ask about it, and they want me to ask about it specifically with respect to the offenses that are being modified by these amendments and by this law. And so it is completely relevant because it's important for people to know, for people in our communities and for Canadians to know what the consequences of the changes to this legislation might be. So I'll ask the experts again. Can you share with us how bail works for hate-motivated offenses currently?
So I'll do my best to provide a general overview of bail in Canada, recognizing that it is of interest right now. So the Charter of Rights and Freedoms does include the right to reasonable bail unless there is just cause to deny bail. There are 3 reasons outlined in the Criminal Code for which bail can be denied: to ensure that those charged with an offence appear in court when required, to maintain public safety by assessing and managing any potential risks if an accused person is released, and to maintain the public's confidence in the justice system. There are 2 minor amendments proposed in Bill C-9 to add the proposed intimidation offence to the bail provisions that would require a justice to consider whether or not to order a firearms prohibition if someone came before the bail court for that offence, as well as requiring a justice to consider electronic monitoring or a non-communication order, again for the intimidation offence. Those are the proposals that are in Bill C-9 that would respond to bail.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that answer. Can you tell me how Bill C-14 would change those provisions?
So I'm not here to speak to Bill C-14.
Two things. I'm really having trouble hearing you. There's discussions going on every which way I turn. Sorry. to my left and to my right. So if people could,
So let me repeat the
Yeah,
question,
if I can hear
especially
the
since I
question.
really should have asked it through the chair. So through the chair, I'm wondering if counsel for the Department of Justice can tell us how Bill C-14 would change the bail provision she just described.
Point of order.
sorry, is this related to Bill C-9 or C-14?
Well, no, it is related to C-9, Mr. Chair, because what's happening here is C-9 is going to make some changes to the bail provisions. And so C-14 is going to make further changes to those bail provisions. And I realize that my Liberal colleagues do not want to study C-14, but that doesn't change the fact that members of my community have questions about how C-14 will impact Bill C-9.
Bill C-9 does not make any changes. There's no proposed changes to the bail provision.
Actually, I just asked the question and got the
But I would
answer.
like
And because
Look, again, I'm not trying to stop you or prevent you from asking questions. I was having trouble hearing. All I heard you talk about was C-14. If it's in the context of Bill C-9,
So
then,
I'll just,
then go ahead. That's fine.
if you'll just allow me to establish the relevance, Mr. Chair. Bill C-9 amends the criminal code, and that means that people can get arrested. And it's the removal of a defense means that it's unfortunately, Monsieur Fortin, getting arrested is not actually funny. And my office, my constituency office, my community offices are actually getting flooded with emails from people who are actually genuinely concerned that with this defense removed, I've had pastors who have called me and they've said, I've always been bipartisan. I have many members of my congregation, but they are universally asking me they're universally asking me to meet with you, and they're asking you to express the concerns that we have around C-9. And so...
Okay, this isn't a discussion between two members at the
that's fair.
table either,
But in terms of why it's relevant for me to ask our counsel from the Department of Justice about C-14 is that whenever anyone gets arrested, bail provisions do come into play.
Let me put it to you another way. If you were to ask a question with a hypothetical based on an impaired driving charge, that wouldn't be relevant to C-9.
But I'm not.
So by the same token, neither does the question.
But
Mr.
Chair,
I'm very, very
14.
concerned about the process here.
Point of-
You could make a very simple argument that bail is relevant because bail doesn't just deal with release. Bail deals with conditions. So, for instance, when someone is potentially arrested on a hate-motivated offense, they would be subject to various conditions, such as seizure of their communications devices,
Okay, thank
or
you,
maybe
Mr.
prohibition of social media. So it is relevant.
Thank you. Thank you. You had a point of order, Ms. Latanzio?
Yes, I did. The member just said that we do not want to debate C-14. So again, I'm going to put forward and ask a unanimous consent that we send Bill C-14 to the House so that we can carry on with the third reading and deal with C-14 in the House, Mr. Chair.
Chair, could we have a brief suspension as you granted earlier on a similar request?
Do we have unanimous consent? Let's deal with that first.
Can we do a brief suspension?
Do we have unanimous consent first?
Monsieur Fortin has already said
You
no.
earlier offered a suspension
I'll
under this
suspend for
exact
2 minutes,
circumstance.
yes.
Thank you.
Would be happy
more than happy to send C-14 back to the House because it is a priority for Canadians.
So that's unanimous
It's a
consent?
priority for stakeholders.
Mr. Brock,
The answer is a yes.
So we have unanimous consent?
Well, from the Conservatives, you do.
No. Okay. All right, so we don't have unanimous consent. Okay. I promised Mr. Brock that I would give him an answer with respect to timing within the next hour, and I have 1 minute left. So being a man true to my word, I'm telling you now that I'm suspending the meeting, and I will see you in January.